just asked how much a semester is. These are about £3,000 in the UK, yes?
Yes.
Guess how much they are here?
Well, 2,000.
50
gold.
50
gold.
I know their overheads are low, but that's extraordinary.
The economy is broken, and I don't mean the global economy. Even though that's kinda true, I'm talking about the economy of Skyrim. That is because of one thing. This golden coin is a Septim, usually referred to in-game as gold, the currency of the Third Tamrielic Empire, named after its founder, and its value in Skyrim specifically has me scratching my head. A large reason for this is the scaling, which either makes traditionally expensive items far too cheap, or traditionally cheap items far too expensive, and the best way to explain this is to use maths, which, okay, let me cook, I'll make it interesting, I promise. The main out-of-universe answer for this is obviously that Bethesda are putting in values that are better for gameplay, rather than representative of what a real society with a functioning economy would be like. But some things weirdly do make sense. So let's start counting the Benjamins, or I guess the Tibers, and first begin to figure out how much one of these gold coins are actually worth in the world of Skyrim.
Everything's for sale, my friend. Everything. If I had a sister, I'd sell her in a second.
So before looking at how much a gold coin is worth in the real world, using some relative scaling, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. I live in Old Blighty, also known as England, so I will be using the British pound for my own understanding. But Matilda here will pop up with the exchange rates for dollars and euros anytime I mention the pound's value. And also, before actually looking at the value of a septim and why that's a bit of a fruitless task, let's talk about the scaling issue first, in real world money terms. To do that, let's look at this piece of bread. Now weirdly, both the full and half loaves are 2 gold, but let's just use a full loaf for this, and because it's hand baked, let's compare it to a fancier loaf from Marks and Spencer's. Now if you're not British, Marks and Spencer's, sometimes called Marks and Sparks or M&S, is the fancy middle class supermarket that sells Percy pigs, and their white bloomer loaf is £2.20 on Ocado. Now let's look at Breeze Home, a small family home that can go up to 3 bedrooms, but is built to be 2. It's 5,000 septims with no furniture, so let's take the refurbished price of 6,800 septims. Now Whiterun is sort of the second or third city of Skyrim economically speaking, and if Solitude, the capital, is like London, Whiterun is probably comparable to somewhere like Manchester, Birmingham or Liverpool. I'll use Manchester because it seems like Whiterun is Skyrim's second city with all the trade, even if Windhelm is culturally the second city. And for those of you who don't know, Manchester is the most expensive out of the cities that aren't London that I've mentioned here, in terms of cost of living. At least as of this video, that might change. So I looked for a property for sale in Manchester that is comparable to Breezehome, a 2 to 3 bed detached house on the small end deep in the city, since Breezehome is next to the market square. And I cannot believe this is where this video is taking me, but I ended up on Rightmove and found this property for £280,000, which seems kinda cheap to me. Maybe I have my London or my London adjacent brain on, but if we compare this to the Marks and Sparks loaf from before, it would be worth 127,273 loaves. Compare this to the bread in Skyrim, Breezehome would be worth 3,400 loaves of bread, which shows you the scaling issue I talked about before. Now yes, UK house prices are getting out of hand, but for Skyrim this either means food is really expensive or houses are really cheap. A way of working out which is which is looking at how much a person in Skyrim gets paid.
The wise trader finds the best opportunities, even if he must travel far to find them. Skyrim is a ripe opportunity indeed.
So, I originally had a plan to work out how much a septim was actually worth, and then compare how much money citizens would have in real life. But, as I said before, we'll get into why this proved to be fruitless later. Instead, we're going to look at how much people in Skyrim get paid when working. The problem with that is that we never get paid in wage. We only get paid based on the jobs that we do for people, kinda like a freelancer, and so it's really tricky to work out how much someone in Skyrim usually gets paid, because these miners aren't clearing out an entire mine on their own, as we can. Now mercenaries get paid 100 gold at a time for bounties, plus whatever they manage to loot. So obviously, because of the loot, the income is variable. And again, we've no idea how often a normal mercenary that isn't a literal walking and shouting Deus Ex Machina gets paid. Is it a job once a week? Is it a job once a month? I'm not really sure, but we do know how much our spouses make from a shop. Now our spouse, who owns a small, successful business, gets paid 200 gold septims a day, if we assume we get half of the income, thus multiplying the 100 gold we get from them by 2 as our share. Now merchants tend to have different hours in Skyrim, but most work from 8 AM to 8 PM, meaning 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and thus get paid 16 to 17, or 16.6 recurring to be exact, septims an hour. That's around 8 loaves an hour, and if we compare that to the average business owner in the UK, who earns around £25 an hour according to Glassdoor, that's around 11 loaves an hour if we take the Marks and Spencer's White Bloomer from before. Yeah, I'm beginning to have that what am I doing with my life moment right now, but that shows food is probably more expensive in Skyrim than in the UK, relatively speaking, which is saying something because food is really expensive at the moment. But what about house prices? Again, let's go back and look at Breezehome, with all its bells and whistles costing 6,800 septims. Now, it would take a shop owner in Skyrim 408 hours, roughly, to buy the home, provided they spend their septims on nothing else. Which obviously isn't realistic, but we just need a number to work with here. Now, I don't know what the tax situation is in Skyrim, and I assume it's probably different from hold to hold, but with food and possibly rent, it would obviously take way longer. Just park this 408 hour unit for now, and when we look at a UK shop owner trying to do the same with this 280,000 Manchester house without taxes and whatnot, it would take them 11,200 hours to buy it outright if we're using that Glassdoor £25 an hour figure. Now obviously, almost no one buys a house outright anymore, but this shows you that food in Skyrim is hella expensive, while house prices are not. For another example, let's look at the highest end of the Skyrim property ladder, Proudspire Manor, in Solitude, which cost 25,000 septims and an additional 14,000 with Half-Fire, making it 39,000 septims in total if you want all the bells and whistles. That would take the spouse in question, without taxes, food and whatever else, 2,340 hours of work total. To be fair, there is also the chance that taxes and food are already covered by your spouse, because they will cook you a meal every day and you don't ever have the Skyrim taxman showing up. But if we look at the real world, which I really don't want to, but content's content, we can look at a London house with 3 beds in a traditionally posh area. Let's pick Kensington. Kensington's fancy, and this one here is £4.5 million, which, if we do the maths, it's... oh, Shaw's bones. That's 180,000 hours without paying for anything else. Maybe this should be called Why the UK's Economy is Broken. So, after all that maths, what we've found is that houses are cheap in Skyrim, but food is expensive, at least according to that one wage we get in the entire game. But this weirdly makes sense to some degree. Okay, not really to the extremes we see in game, probably, I'm not an economist, but Skyrim is a country in a civil war. Farms are getting raided by bandits, forsworn, giants, trolls, wolves, vampires, dragons, and probably way more, plus the road to Cyrodiil is blocked, meaning trade isn't the easiest right now. The Forsworn probably don't make trade to High Rock easier, and a lot of the young men who would ordinarily farm the land are off fighting in the Civil War. Food prices would thus be higher, logically speaking, and all of this craziness would probably cause property prices to fall because, again, people don't really want to come to Skyrim to live here. Now, again, nowhere in Skyrim is safe. You could be chilling in your home city, go out to do some shopping in Whiterun Square, maybe get some veg, some meat, chill out in the Bannered Mare, and then, when you finally go back home, a dragon comes out and attacks the city, eating you whole and chucking you aside. But, to be fair, nowhere in Tamriel is that safe. We've played the other games, it's a mess everywhere. Now financially, living in Skyrim would actually be doable based on how much you make, provided you don't bother with a retirement plan because, well, you're probably not making it to retirement, let's be honest. There are enough random encounters in cities to do you in, unless you're the Dragonborn. But obviously, I do have to preface that Skyrim looks to be feudal, and the average person working the lands probably doesn't own them. Think about how many people own the farms in Skyrim and how many of them actually work on those farms. I'm looking at you, Nazim. So owning property probably isn't the easiest thing for the average person to do. We have to put a lot of work in just to be able to own property in a hold. You can't even buy a home in Whiterun until you do all that nonsense in Bleak Falls Barrow. But then again, this does all kinda make sense. So why am I saying the economy in Skyrim is broken? It's not healthy, but there aren't many in the real world that are. Well, that has to do with trying to work out how much one of these suckers is actually worth in the real world, and for that we obviously can't use bread.
A word of advice, my friend. Do not mix gambling and drink. Taken together, they will empty your pockets of every septim.
So, many have tried to calculate the worth of a septim and have used many different methods to do this. Some have looked at the size of a septim and compared it to the price of gold, assuming that the coin is pure gold and worth its material value. The thing is, coins are very rarely worth their material. They just get assigned a value, and if you were to use this method, a single septim would be worth literal thousands of pounds or dollars, making this here loaf the price of some house deposits. Another option is to try to work out what the weight unit means and use this to compare the value of septims to a metal. Probably gold or silver, because we have global values for gold and silver, but this is where Skyrim, being a video game, gets in the way. You see, this weight unit is a nonsense value. It exists not to represent the real world in any meaningful way, from what I can tell, but to be a game mechanic, which isn't a criticism from me. Sure, using either kilos or pounds or whatever physical measurement you want doesn't work, but I don't have a problem with the weight mechanic. Well, I do have a problem with it right now because I'm trying to work some things out, but that's beside the point. Let me explain what I mean. All these metal ingots are the same size and weigh the same with this weight value, which is a problem because each of these metals has a different density. This ingot of gold weighs more than this ingot of silver, for instance, meaning that this weight mechanic doesn't actually mean mass. So we can't use the weight unit to work out how much a gold ingot weighs. ironically, and then use it to work out the value of a septim because it isn't consistent. Now I have seen a lot of others suggest that this weight mechanic isn't actually weight, it's encumbrance. So how inconvenient something is to carry. And with these ingots being the same size, this kinda makes sense. I guess it's similar to the Resident Evil storage system, but it isn't being visualized. Again, this has another issue. These ingots are huge, and given the price of gold in the real world, this here ingot will be worth a truly ridiculous amount. For size reference, this is 1 kilo of gold and is worth over £114,000 sterling as of this video, and the Skyrim ingot is way bigger, but is only worth 100 septims. Even if we assume that this is 1 kilogram of gold, which it obviously isn't, and then plug a bunch of stuff in a calculator, a septim would be worth £1,400, making a single bread loaf £2,800. That's over 700 Tesco meal deals. Also on the topic of Tesco meal deals, why are they £3.85 for the club card now? What's going on? I remember when they used to be £3 on the dot.
Christ almighty. Hello, horse. I shall call you Tesco.
I should probably stop talking about Tesco's before we lose the American audience, but you see the problem here? All of these methods end up having the septim worth a lot of real world currency when using gold as a measuring stick. You could argue that this just means the septim currency is really strong compared to the real world currency, which is fair, but the real issue is that there is nothing we can reliably compare in Tamriel. Wizard types can just use transmute mineral ore to just make more gold, and there are more valuable metals that don't exist in our real world, like ebony, which is the hardened blood of a literal god, Lorcan, not a type of special wood. This is why I compare things based on how much bread loaves are worth and how many loaves a house is worth, and look at how many hours it would take someone getting wages in Skyrim to buy that house. Still, a house, for as comparatively cheap as it is, and food being as relatively expensive as it is, kind of makes the Skyrim economy a bit of an enigma, or rather a gross exaggeration. We're also ignoring that wheat costs a whopping 5 gold, and 3 of those, or 15 gold's worth, are needed to make 1 sack of flour, which is required to make 1 loaf of bread that only sells for 2 gold. So yeah, the ratios are off everywhere. And this is a video game, so it's not that deep, but the economy is still broken, and this is where my research is taking me. I could really do with some sourdough bread right now. Thanks for watching perhaps the strangest set of ravings I have ever put on this channel. Originally I had planned for this to be a how much is 1 gold coin worth kind of video, then work out how much someone gets paid in Skyrim and use this to try to figure out how capable the average person is when it comes to buying a house. Obviously, as of 2026, it's very difficult for someone of my generation, Gen Z, to buy a house. So I guess this is some Skyrim copium, this is the real fantasy of the game. But those dreams were dashed, and instead we had to compare based on loaves of bread, because that weight system threw me for a loop. But I hope this was at least somewhat interesting nonetheless. Let me know if you enjoyed this non-lore kind of video that isn't the typical let's look at Bethesda games kind of shtick. It just started off with me looking at house prices, getting sad and thinking, hey, I wonder if this is more doable in Skyrim. Turns out, it is. But either way, please do the YouTube ritual thing of liking, commenting and subscribing. Let me know if you enjoyed this double upload, this kind of shorter video, and I will hopefully see you in another video.
And sails fly at half-mast in the